From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good evening, everybody. It's very nice to see you here on this Founders Day, for this Founders Day concert. I have two special guests who we'll be speaking with tonight and hearing a bit more about the music. First to my right is Michelle Galante, who is the artistic director and conductor of the Argento Chamber Ensemble that we're going to be hearing tonight. And we also have Anne Clear with us, who is a composer of a piece that has been performed once, I believe, on Monday, and this will be its second performance. But you know what they say: the second time is that's when the magic really happens. So
that was just a warm up.
That's right. And we'll be hearing some of Michelle's music tonight as well. So so we have two composers and really unique and interesting artists here, and so we're very happy to have you. Yeah, I thought I'd just kind of jump into asking about the program, and maybe Michelle, start with you with some of the looking at the first half. What prompted you to start working with Anne?
Well, actually, our clarinetist Carol McConnell is a contrabass clarinetist, as well as she plays all of the different clarinets: E flat, A, B flat, bass clarinet, and contrabass clarinet. Contrabass clarinet is the instrument that Anne wrote for it in a quasi-concerto fashion, and she actually can, of course, speak best for that. Maybe I think you should speak about this because they have a very close connection. Throughout history, there's always been very rich relationships between soloists and composers, and here we have one right here. So.
Yeah, well, I've been working on two pieces for Carol since about 2008, 2009. So tonight you'll hear the second piece in a series of 5 pieces. So the series is entitled Eam, and tonight's has a kind of subtitle called Taking Apart Your Universe. So Carol has played the first piece, Eam 1. It's a B-flat clarinet solo. She premiered that a few years ago now. And then this piece tonight kind of opens up that world of that first B-flat clarinet solo into the contrabass clarinet. And she has an ensemble of about 10 instruments surrounding her. So you'll see the contrabass clarinet. It's a very unusual instrument. It's plays as low as the piano can play, so it's really earthy. So we really worked on I think when I met Carol, she had just bought the contrabass clarinet. I mean, she played all the other clarinets for years. So I think we've kind of really discovered the instrument together a lot, like really kind of, it has 4 octaves from the very lowest you can imagine to about, say, middle C. And then after that you get higher register, but through harmonics and multiphonics. So we kind of zoned in on the different colors of these registers, and then the ensemble that's around her kind of orchestrate these further. So we've worked on the color of the instrument for a long time together to try and give it this kind of extended life that the ensemble gives to it as well.
It strikes me that I just got to hear a little bit of the rehearsal, so it's my first experience of the piece, but it strikes me that you really kind of orchestrate out from the instrument into the rest of the ensemble, and we can really hear like kind of almost like a timbral expansion into that space that's really lovely and really nice. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm hugely interested in timbre. And it's something very much, I think, of the last century for composers to be interested in very kind of unique sound qualities of certain instruments. And because this is, I guess, quite a new instrument and new for composers to be writing for it, when you kind of zone in on different colors of the instrument, they introduce a different sense of time, or the way the sound kind of buzzes, the low register. It's so electronic almost. So that encourages you then to kind of think that way in terms of orchestration as well. So it's low register I kind of match with this trio of bassoon, piano, and double bass. So they're very low with the low register, the clarinet. And then the guitar is matched with the next kind of part of the register. And then there's a trio of flute, cello, and violin that are kind of the next octave. And then the trumpet and the water percussion are the highest octave. And the saxophone then kind of veers into this kind of multiphonic kind of harmonic area. So it really, I guess with the ensemble, I tried to almost reconstruct the color of the entire register of the clarinet and just make it into this huge clarinet.
And so you also use the B-flat clarinet as well in that?
Yeah, a little bit of the B-flat, and that kind of is trying to kind of bring us back to the solo that opens the series of pieces. So then this piece then kind of expands on the solo. Yeah.
Can you say a bit more about the rest of the pieces in the series? Are those already finished? Are they?
Well, you'll hear at the end of this piece tonight, the clarinet kind of slowly hands its powers over to the flute. So from there, the flute pieces, the third piece is a solo bass flute piece. Then the fourth one is a contrabass flute, an ensemble, an electronics piece. And then the last piece of the series will be premiered in February with Carol on contrabass clarinet, the contrabass flutist that I've been working with, Richard Craig, and the RTE National Symphony Orchestra in Dublin. So it ends with the two contras kind of meeting.
Oh, wow.
Actually, I just want to mention, professional musicians were always working and very busy, and Anne, we've had a really wonderful rehearsal period with Anne for the last 10 days working on your music. But there's something deeper, actually. Carol has been our clarinetist from the very beginning, and she's also Irish. And Argento's gone to Ireland many times, and we have a relationship with this country. And there's a very strong, of course, literary tradition with Beckett and Joyce and Yeats, many people who, it's just in their blood. And I would love for you to tell the story behind this, but I haven't had a chance to share with you that I've always been waiting for to see this Irish spirit come out in even suggestions or even ideas. I've basically just been, very quietly watching for these last 2 weeks. She doesn't know this, but but I think it would be great storytelling is also a very big part of Irish culture. I think it would be great to hear the story of Iam, a little bit more about.
Yeah, well, Iam is actually a little village in England, not in Ireland. But it's one I read about around the time I started writing the first piece for Carol. And it's just this tiny village that the plague was discovered there in the 16th century. And this tiny village decided to kind of blockade itself in from the rest of the world rather than letting the plague spread to the outside the village. So I just took it as a metaphor, really, in terms of what I was talking about earlier, these different kind of colors, parts of the contrabass clarinet that I really wanted to zone in on and kind of isolate them, and then eventually let them kind of spread and become one kind of bigger place. So it was really just a metaphor that I used to get my mind moving, I guess. But I've never actually visited the village, but I've been working on these pieces since, as I said, like 2008. And I always said when I finish the whole 5 pieces, then I'll go and visit, because I only live in Ireland, which is like a short plane away from, like an hour flight to where this is. But I just recently got a teaching job in a university, in the University of York, and it happens to be right beside Ian.
Oh, wow.
So I could even live there now.
Wow, wow. 5 more
Funny.
pieces.
You know, one thing, and we can, I think, speak more about the piece, but one thing that strikes me as fortuitous with the programming tonight is the relationship between your piece, Anne, and the Sharino. There's almost like both of them have a very organic sort of feeling to them, a very breath-centered type of feeling, and maybe yours is more straight-tone breath, and the Sharino is more vibrato breath or tremolo. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. But there's this real sense of, I don't know, at least I get the sense of a breathing entity on stage. Is that something that you're looking at, or do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love this piece, the Sharino piece. Actually, for my doctoral studies, it was one of the pieces I chose to write a major paper on. So when Michelle programmed it with my piece, I was like, wow. It was, I mean, hearing Sharino's music for the first time, I was totally blown away. I think it's so bodily and terribly, I think, psychological as well. So it's definitely an inspiration, yeah.
Maybe we can speak a bit more. We have, maybe you can say a few words about your pieces that are on the first half, Michelle.
You know, actually, I think I'll just say one thing.
Sure.
In terms of concert programming, there's a convention of intermissions, and I always have had, for my whole life, I've had this feeling that when there's an intermission, whether we like it or not, people socialize. People go out and see their friends, you know, they touch base with their friends, and somehow there's a need to leave the realm of music. And so I never have, you know, when you accept that there's going to be an intermission, because we don't have to have intermissions, that's already a convention. And when we accept that convention, I always feel like, well, we need some way of exiting the world of music into the social world, like, and usually, so I always like to choose an energetic piece, and I chose to program the solo piano piece because it has that kind of energy, and some of the other pieces, like Anne's piece and Salvatore Sharino's piece, these are pieces that end poetically, wistfully, you know, quietly, and you know, at the end of pieces like that, the last thing I want to do is go socialize. So I try to end first halves of programs with energy, something that's going to actually something so that the psychological mood you're in doesn't contradict, you know, socializing with friends, saying hi to friends, you know. So that's the reason why I programmed the piano piece. I'd prefer to leave the clarinet piano piece as a surprise.
Sure.
You know,
Well, maybe you can say something, though, about the title of the piano piece.
Oh, I think it's not at all to be cagey, not at all, trust me. I think it's a little bit pathological. I mean, actually totally pathological. I think it'll speak for itself, the way the repetition and the layers and the obsession, I think it'll speak for itself.
Okay, well, we have, on the final part of the program, we have a very unique situation where Anne was talking about how she was, in some ways, orchestrating out from this deep bass instrument. We have a orchestrating in kind of a thing from Mahler's 10th Symphony. And this is a very challenging thing to do. I think it's a very rewarding but challenging thing to do, and maybe you can speak a bit about what that process has been like. And you've also done other Mahler projects as well.
Yeah, that's actually, Mahler is an obsession, and I feel, as a conductor, I do a lot of, you know, Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, Tchaikovsky, all of canonical works I conduct and love and have loved since I was a child and so forth. But when I really have started to feel in the last couple of years that especially when I conduct normal classical music, it's very, very clear to me that it's music from another time and a place. It's from, whatever. If it's Bach, it's Luther in Germany. If it's Haydn and Beethoven, it's from Vienna and 18th, 19th century and so forth. And a lot of that music is emblematic of that time. Some of it's very religious, or some of it reflects post-Enlightenment feelings. And, it's a very, very different context, even though this is great music. But a lot of this music doesn't really feel like it relates to modern life. It's more, you have to experience it in a context. Whereas with Mahler, I feel when I'm working on his music, despite the ultra-romantic surface of the music, I feel like I'm conducting music that was written today. I don't know why. This is a completely subjective thing, but I feel like this guy understands modern problems, modern dilemmas, modern conflicts, frustrations. He just gets it. Modern crises. And for that reason, I've been quite obsessed with his works for a long time now. The 10th Symphony is something that's particularly problematic because it's unfinished. And there's some very strange things in the manuscript. Basically, when Mahler died, he left 5 folders, each folder with sketches, a short score from beginning to end of a movement, of one of his 5 movements. And the second movement has Scherzo Finale written, which is a contradiction because there's also the 5th movement as a finale. So a scherzo is a contrasting movement that has a binary form and that is largely transitional into a finale most of the time in classical form. So to say scherzo finale doesn't really make any sense. But he wrote this very clearly, and it became clear as I was studying some other scholars' work on this piece that Mahler really was thinking of this piece as a 2-part symphony, one part being the first 2 movements and the second part being the last 3 movements, and that the second movement really answers the first. So I did the best I could to retain the spirit of Mahler as I see it, and put these 2 movements together as one unit for a listening audience, for you. So that's basically the story of the piece.
I mean, that was something that Mahler did in other pieces too, like in the 5th Symphony, or and the 4th and 5th kind of. I mean, it's maybe a little bit more thematic unity.
No,
there,
the 8th is in 2 parts. The first is in 2 parts. A lot of them actually are bipart. A lot of the symphonies are. Yeah, and also Das Lied von der Erde is 5 songs cycle and then 1 massive movement. It's in 2 parts also.
I'm wondering if I can go back to Anne. If I can kind of project, you haven't heard the piece yet, but if I can project a bit forward into one thing that you're going to hear, one thing that you said earlier struck me, and that was the passing off from the contrabass clarinet to the bass flute. Is this kind of that moment where you start to have more of a pitch awareness and then a silence? Is that moment, or is it more of just a progressive thing across the entire piece?
Yeah, it builds slowly across the piece. I mean, you'll hear, so the percussionist plays a waterphone, which is this kind of spiky, small metallic instrument. You'll see he's kind of near the front of the stage at the beginning, and then he walks back to another station at the back of the stage that has a timp and another kind of metallic instrument that I use as well.
You built that instrument, right?
Yeah, well, a sculptor built it for me.
Oh, fantastic.
So it's a kind of it's also a little bit like a waterphone, but without as much resonance. So when you hear that sound, in a way it's a little bit, I call it like a kind of embedded dream in the piece. It comes back a few times, and it kind of is trying to embed this new flute material into the music. And we hear it particularly then at the end. So it's that kind of new percussion material that kind of brings this flute and clarinet connection together throughout the piece.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's really, make sure you take a look at these instruments because they're quite unusual, I think, and unique and a very different sound. Mostly bowed, are they? Is that?
Yeah, they're bowed, yeah. And the bows are generally prepared as well, so you hear all these, not just a bow, but like a rippling bow. Yeah.
And I think that the spiky one is actually on top of the tympanic, the membrane, right? So that you get, it actually is kind of a resonator so that you can hear it.
Yeah, it kind of amplifies it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very neat thing, so you'll look for that. Maybe I can ask you both, because I know that, Michelle, you probably have to get ready to do a concert and everything. But maybe I can ask you both about some upcoming compositional projects or whatever type of project that you might be up to that you'd be interested in. Maybe Anne?
Yeah, well, my, I guess, big project that I mentioned of the moment is finishing the orchestra piece of this cycle.
Are there plans to do the entire cycle together, performances together?
It would be amazing, but I don't know how practical it would ever be. Like most composers, I'm not very practical. So it would involve like two very different large ensembles, a huge electronic setup for one piece and an orchestra. So if anyone would like to do it, I'd be more than happy. I'm thinking of proposing it to the people of EAM, actually, in England.
Actually, just to share one idea with you about that, there's a very large, Les Espaces Acoustiques of Gérard Grisey. Grisey was a French composer. He wrote this massive cycle, kind of, in some ways I think of your piece. His piece started with solo viola, then goes to a septet, then goes to 18 musicians. This is one piece for solo viola, one piece for septet, one piece for 18 musicians, one piece for 33 musicians, one piece for full orchestra, and one piece for full orchestra and 4 horns. And I did my pilgrimage to hear this piece rehearsed and performed in Oslo in like 2002 with a conductor who's great at it and knows it very well. And the biggest problem was that the first 3 pieces were really meant for a small space. And the last 3 pieces were meant for a big space. And this was a really big problem because it meant, really, it was not a good presentation of the first 3 pieces. It worked for the last 3, but the first 3 suffered because they needed an intimate space, and the last 3 needed a massive space. And I think this is, so I think in your planning, maybe you need some kind of I think what would be great is a place that has different size venue, in the same building. I think that would work.
So again, if anybody has any venues they'd like to offer, we'd appreciate it. And Michelle, what types of projects do you have coming up?
I have, okay, so now I'm going to panic. I have a piece that's going to be premiered in 3 weeks, and all but one movement are done. I work with a choreographer named Miro Magloire, and we got a commission from the O'Donnell Foundation, and he's a fantastic person to work with because he, in fact, is a composer, and he was a composer, and he studied with Kogel, so I can speak with him the same way I can speak with Anne. Composers actually, we don't know what we're talking about, and we don't know what each other are talking about, but there's consensus in that. So it's like we don't expect to really understand each other, and we're fine. With this choreographer, he's like that. I can talk with him, or in any case, we understand each other. But I was really only just because I was performing a lot. I wasn't. We like to have a system where I give him all the music first, and I gave him all the music except for a few minutes, and then he said, I'm sorry, I need to start choreographing, and you're going to get a video, and you're going to have to come up with the rest of the music. So Yeah, as soon as this is done, then.
Well, this does mark probably the first time that a composer has ever been this close to the deadline without having a piece ready.
Oh, yeah, right.
Not exactly unheard of, well, why, if we have a few more minutes, maybe we can take some audience questions, if anybody has any questions. I know you'll probably have more after you hear the works, but it's a good opportunity just to ask some questions. There we go. There's a microphone that'll come to you.
Oh, I don't need it.
We need it for the recording. We need it for a recording.
Thank you very much. I have a question for Anne, and it might be a little bit naive, but I hope you'll bear with me. I wish you could share with us a little bit, in a little bit more detail, what exactly it's like when you and the soloist are, to use your words, working together on composing. How exactly do you do that?
Well, I mean, I think it's, for me, it starts as basically as just playing a scale up from the lowest part of the instrument to the highest. And I just listen to that scale over and over again. And then I start to kind of explore out from there. Because as I said, the different octaves of the instrument are very different as you go higher into the instrument. And then it's just, I guess, kind of maybe playing them just in a very traditional way first, so just with tone, then maybe going into more microtonals, so kind of in between the semitones. Then maybe hearing it with more of a percussive timbre, so like slapping the reed rather than just normal playing. And then the clarinet has all these, especially the contra, it has all these variations of air. Like you can have like, you know, half air, half tone, and then much more air. That's still very pitched. So for me, in terms of talking about timbre, which really means color, you know, there's so many different shades you could get of one note, say of like, you know, middle C. You can hear that with air, with a little bit of pitch, with full pitch, with a kind of percussive slap, with a key click. You know, the pitch is present in a lot of different ways. So it's almost, I think, at first like building up a little bit like a dictionary of what the instrument can do. And then from there, I kind of have to go away and think, well, what do I really want to do with that? Like, where do I want to focus? Where do I want to put my focus on in what it can do? And then you go back and you try, you pick some things and you go back and try them. And so it's just a process of trying things together until you finally find what is important to you, what you feel will really speak for you. Yeah.
To follow up on that, do you take into account what feels, even though taking what you just said into account, what feels idiomatic to the player, what feels like natural to the player, or do you push against that, or how do you explore it that way in terms of pushing the player in particular directions, or?
I don't know. I mean, I think Carol is, I mean, I've heard her play so many different kinds of pieces. Like, she's such a great interpreter, and I feel like she throws herself into the mood of any piece. Like, I've seen her play the most gentle things to the most like outrageously like psychotic things to like very classical to very early music. Yeah, I like the first time I saw Carol play was actually on television in Ireland. I was about 17 and she was playing, I was about to start a music degree and she was playing Mozart's clarinet concerto. I thought she just played it so beautifully. And like I never dreamed I'd work with her. And then I met her like, about, I guess 8 years after. And I was like, I saw you on telly when I was like 17. So she plays she plays so much that I don't feel, I've never felt like that I've had to, what's the word, like limit anything in terms of what she can do. She's very much like, you know, it's up to you what you really want to do, and I'll bring it to life then.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Do we have some more questions? Any more questions? There's a couple over here.
Can you both just give us a little bit of the background of how you came to composition? You were doing music and playing, and how did you decide that composition was what you wanted to do next?
I'll give a really short answer. Because I think it's actually very common. I was trained as a classical musician, and I had a crisis, and that was the way out of the crisis. I think, I really think that maybe that may be even the majority of people. I think that, you know, classical music is the music is sublime, and yet there are constraints about it that make it very hard to find one's own place in it. And I'd leave it at that. Yeah.
I guess, and another, I think, very common way of becoming a composer is kind of falling into it by accident as well.
Becoming anything.
Like I kind of ended up in a composition class when I was 19 by just fluke. I was in my second year of undergraduate degree, and I was actually in San Francisco for the summer, and when I came back, I got very sick, and I missed the first few weeks of that year. And when I came back to the department, the head of department was like, you'll either have to repeat the whole thing, or you have to take certain classes that haven't handed in assignments yet. So that's how I ended up in a composition class.
That's profound.
But it was really amazing because the name of the class was Making and Breaking Instruments. And the first piece I heard was Berrios' Sequenza for voice. And like, I really hadn't grown up around composers. I didn't really even know that there were still living composers. So when I heard Berrios' Sequenza for voice, I was just like, it felt like a new world had opened. And I just kept composing from there, really. But it was something that suddenly appeared, and it kind of, I mean, looking back, it makes sense to me that you know, I've always wanted to do something with music, but it was never going to be performance. Maybe I thought teaching, but now when I look back before that, it makes sense that I would want to be a composer, because I've just always been interested in sound, and I've always kind of heard music as like telling me something. I've never seen like music as just music or just kind of pure sound. It's always been something kind of narrative to me. So it makes sense, even though it was something I only discovered when I was maybe 19 or so.
When you're working on,
Sorry.
that's good, right. When you're working on a new piece like this with a particular instrumentalist you're working with, and you're exploring the limits of the instrument and perhaps things that have not been explored before, you have a working relationship with the instrumentalist that you can talk about, you know, this is what we're going to do here, and you know, this is the kind of shading that's going to be done here and so forth. But then when you think about passing this on to future generations, you have to find some ways of notating all of this. And that has always been a fascination of mine. And how do you know, how much of your process is finding ways of noting that in a way that will convey to future generations that will not have you as a resource?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And it does occupy a lot of time in this research or collaborative time I spoke about. So we'd also, when I found something that I thought I'd focus on, we'd talk about how to notate it. But a lot of the sounds too, you know, of the entire ensemble, they're they're kind of unstable in a way. They're these very fragile timbres that, you know, in a way I put them there so they can kind of fluctuate. So that fluctuation in a way is kind of meant to be built into the notation as well. I guess all I can really do is, I mean, it's great when you get a really good realization like tonight. It really stands like a document for the sound that I'm looking for. And then, you know, I try to explain it, the notation, the graphics, in the introduction to the score as well. But as I said, it's now good to have a sonic document as well that I can give people and say, you know, this is what it sounds like. You know.
That's something like I think Lachenmann is now doing that for his string writing. Is having a DVD that goes with where it's a demonstration type of thing, so you can have the visual along with the audio of just some of the techniques. So that's something you could also explore too. Yeah. Definitely helps.
You made videos. She made videos.
Oh, you did? Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. I think we have time for about one more question, if there is one. If not, then I'd like to thank our guests so much for the music we're going to hear and also for speaking with me just now. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, Anne-Claire, Michelle Galante. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.